I found out about it. She's been cheating for a long time. I was tagged in a video on Facebook and what I saw changed everything. It was late, 2:13 a.m. to be exact. I should have been asleep, but I wasn't. Instead, I was sprawled on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through Facebook on my phone, trying to unwind after a long day. Jess, my wife, had gone out for a girls' night with some of her friends, something she did once or twice a month. She'd texted earlier. "Jess. Don't wait up. I might be late. Love you." I'd replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji, trying not to let it bother me. But now, sitting alone in the dark with the TV playing quietly in the background, I was starting to wonder why she wasn't home yet. 2 a.m. was pushing it. Even for Jess. I sighed and refreshed my Facebook feed, telling myself not to be that husband. She was allowed to have a life outside of me. Right? That's when it happened. A notification popped up at the top of my screen. "You've been tagged in a video by Patrick Holmes." I frowned. Patrick Holmes? I hadn't heard that name in years. We'd been college buddies once, but we'd drifted apart after graduation. Seeing his name now felt weird. Curiosity got the better of me. I tapped the notification. The video loaded quickly. It wasn't some throwback photo or meme like I'd expected. It was a live stream. At first, the camera was shaky, panning around a dimly lit room filled with loud music, laughter, and the unmistakable energy of a bachelor party. Guys were hooting and hollering, drinks in hand, cheering someone on. The scene was chaotic, blurry. The kind of wild night you'd expect from a bunch of guys cutting loose. But then the camera focused. And there she was. My heart stopped. Jess. My wife. She was standing in the middle of the room, holding a tray of drinks, wearing a tiny black dress and heels that I hadn't seen before. Her hair was styled, her makeup flawless. And her smile. It wasn't the smile she gave me. It was playful, flirty. The kind of smile that promised trouble. The comments were already rolling in. Best party ever. Where'd you guys find these girls? Damn, that brunette is something else. I stared at the screen, unable to look away. Jess moved through the crowd with ease, laughing at their jokes, letting them slip cash into her hand as if it was the most natural thing in the world. She wasn't out with friends. She wasn't at some cozy wine bar talking about work and life. She was working this party. Like a pro. The camera zoomed in on her face just as she turned toward me, it felt like, and winked. The wink froze me. Jess wasn't drunk or caught off guard. She was comfortable. Confident. The way she moved through that crowd made it clear, this wasn't her first time. The video panned to a large chair in the middle of the room. The kind of chair you'd see at a cheap strip club. A guy wearing a cheap plastic crown sat in it, clearly the groom. His buddies crowded around, throwing cash and cheering. Then, Jess stepped forward. The guys lost it. Whistling, shouting. One of them slapped the groom on the back, yelling, "You're welcome, buddy." Jess climbed onto the groom's lap, draping her arms around his neck. His face went bright red as she whispered something in his ear. He nodded like a nervous teenager, hands awkwardly hovering near her hips. The camera cut away for a second. A guy walked past holding a bottle of champagne, spraying it over the crowd. The camera refocused, this time zooming in on Jess again. She stood up from the groom's lap and started untying the front of her dress. My stomach dropped. Before the video could go any further, I backed out of the live stream. My hand shook as I refreshed the comments section. More familiar names. Bruce Coumans. Legendary party. Bruce. He wasn't just watching the video. He'd commented. He knew I'd see it. Then another comment popped up, this one from the guy streaming the video. Patrick Holmes. Tag Alex. He needs to see this. The words punched me in the gut. They were tagging me. On purpose. They knew exactly what they were doing. Jess knew. A fresh wave of comments flooded in, each one worse than the last. Wait, is that Alex's wife? Dude, she's married. Millbrook's hottest doctor, huh? I gripped the phone tighter. My pulse roared in my ears. I couldn't think straight, couldn't breathe. Then came the final blow. Another notification popped up at the top of my screen. Bruce Coumans has tagged you in a comment. I opened it. Bruce. Catch up soon, Alex. I stared at Bruce's comment. My hands trembled, but I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Jess. Jess. Hey babe, heading home soon. Love you. I almost laughed out loud. Heading home from where? From the party I just watched you work. From Bruce's side. Did you type that between lap dances? I started typing a response but stopped. No. Not yet. Not like this. Instead, I kept scrolling. The live video was still going. Jess was back on camera, laughing as she sat on Bruce's lap now, his hand resting too comfortably on her thigh. I hit pause. I couldn't watch any more. The phone buzzed again. Another text from Jess. Jess. Traffic's bad. I'll be a little late. Lies. I slammed my phone down on the coffee table, pacing the room. Every piece of this betrayal was fitting together. The girls' nights, the random overtime shifts, all those times she said she was working late at the hospital. This wasn't new. It was routine. I checked the clock. 2:30 a.m. She'd be home soon. I grabbed my keys and headed to the car, adrenaline burning through me. I couldn't sit around waiting for her. I needed answers, and I needed them now. My first stop. Bruce's house. The drive was a blur. I didn't even notice the streets or the lights. All I saw was Jess's face on that screen, smiling, winking, lying. When I pulled up to Bruce's place, there was no sign of a party. The house was dark, quiet. I sat there for a moment, debating whether to knock. Then I spotted a familiar car parked down the street. Jess's car. She was still here. I got out, my footsteps silent on the pavement. As I approached the house, I heard voices from the backyard, muffled, laughing, intimate. My fists clenched. I crept around the side of the house, peeking through the fence. And there they were. Jess and Bruce. Sitting on the patio, drinks in hand. She leaned in close, her hand resting on his chest as they talked. Her laugh rang out, carefree, happy. It wasn't the Jess I knew. It was someone else. Someone who had no idea I was watching. I stood there, fists clenched, watching my wife laugh with him. Jess tossed her hair over her shoulder, leaning in closer to Bruce. Her hand lingered on his chest like she belonged there. Bruce smirked, saying something I couldn't hear. Whatever it was, it made Jess giggle and lightly slap his arm, the way she used to with me. That was it. Something inside me snapped. I pushed open the gate, the latch clicking loudly in the still night. They both looked up, startled, their laughter dying instantly. Alex? Jess's voice cracked. She shot to her feet, panic flashing across her face. What are you doing here? Bruce leaned back in his chair, all smug confidence. He didn't bother getting up. Hey, Alex. Fancy seeing you here. Enough. Just stop talking. Bruce. I crossed the patio in 3 long strides. Jess grabbed my arm, trying to stop me. Alex, please. I can explain. Don't. Touch me. I yanked my arm free, my eyes locked on Bruce. He stood slowly, setting his drink down on the table. Come on, man. Let's talk about this like adults. My fist connected with his jaw before he could finish. Crack. Bruce stumbled back, crashing into a patio chair. His drink toppled, spilling onto the concrete. I didn't stop. I grabbed him by the collar and pulled him up, slamming him against the wall. You think this is funny? I growled, my voice shaking with rage. You think you can sit here, take my wife, and I'm just going to smile and shake your hand? Alex, stop. Jess screamed, trying to pull me back. I shoved her away, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to make her back off. Stay out of this, Jess. You made your choice. Bruce struggled, his face twisted in pain. You're overreacting. I hit him again. Harder. Blood sprayed from his nose, splattering across the patio. Overreacting. I snarled. You've been screwing my wife behind my back, and you have the balls to call this an overreaction? He gasped, spitting blood onto the ground. Jess was sobbing now, her hands pressed to her mouth. Please, Alex, don't do this. It's not what you think. Not what I think. I spun to face her, my chest heaving. I watched you, Jess. I watched the whole damn thing. You think I don't know? You think I'm an idiot? Bruce groaned, trying to push himself up. Stay down, I barked, kicking his leg out from under him. He hit the ground hard, coughing and wheezing. The patio was quiet except for the sound of his labored breathing and Jess's muffled sobs. I stood over him, fists still clenched, blood dripping from my knuckles. You deserve worse, I said coldly. Bruce coughed again, wiping blood from his face. He looked up at me with a crooked grin. You think you're the first, he wheezed. You think Jess just started this with me? You've been living a lie for years, Alex. You've always been the fool. I froze. The words hung in the air like a noose tightening around my neck. Jess sobbed harder, turning away. Bruce chuckled, even as blood dripped from his lips. Go ahead. Hit me again. It won't change the truth. I stepped back, my chest heaving. My whole body shook with fury and heartbreak. I wasn't sure what hurt more, his words, or the fact that Jess didn't deny them. I stood there, breathing hard, Bruce's blood staining my fists. His words echoed in my head. You've always been the fool. Jess still hadn't denied it. She wasn't begging for forgiveness. She wasn't shouting at Bruce to shut up. She wasn't even looking at me. Instead, she sat slumped on a patio chair, arms wrapped around herself, tears streaming silently down her face. That silence said everything. I wasn't the man she was trying to protect. I was the guy being played. Bruce wiped his bloody nose with the back of his hand, grinning through split lips. You done, Alex, he muttered. Or you gonna keep swinging? I took a step toward him. His smirk faded. Wait. Crack. My fist smashed into his jaw again, and this time, he crumpled completely. He didn't try to get back up. He just lay there on the blood-spattered patio, groaning in pain. I turned to Jess. Look at me, I demanded. She flinched, wiping her eyes but still refusing to meet my gaze. Look at me. Slowly, she raised her head, her eyes puffy and red. How long? I asked, my voice cold. Her lips trembled. Alex. How long, Jess? Don't make me ask again. Her shoulders sagged. She knew there was no point in lying anymore. 2 years, she whispered. I staggered back like I'd been punched in the gut. 2 years. While I was at work. While I was tucking our kids into bed. While I was making plans for our future, she was sneaking off with him. Was it just Bruce? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Jess shook her head slowly, her eyes full of shame. No, she said quietly. I clenched my jaw, my fists trembling again. How many? Jess sobbed harder. Alex, please. How many? She covered her face with her hands, her voice muffled. I don't know. I lost count. I felt the ground shift beneath me. The air seemed to drain from my lungs. I'd expected lies. Excuses. Maybe even some twisted version of the truth. But this? This was worse. Jess stood slowly, her arms outstretched, as if she thought I'd hold her. I never stopped loving you, she whispered. You have to believe that. I stared at her in disbelief. You call this love? Her hands dropped to her sides. I was lonely. I didn't know how to stop. Bruce groaned from the ground, spitting blood onto the patio. Told you, man. She's good at what she does. Everyone wants her. You just couldn't keep up. Before I knew what I was doing, I grabbed a nearby patio chair and smashed it across Bruce's back. Crack. The chair splintered into pieces, and Bruce let out a strangled yell. Jess screamed. Alex, stop. But I wasn't listening. I knelt down, grabbing Bruce by the collar again, forcing him to look at me. If you ever come near my family again, I'll bury you, I growled. Do you hear me? He coughed, blood dribbling from his mouth. Yeah. I hear you. I let him drop to the ground, then turned to Jess. I'm done, I said. With you. With all of this. Her face crumpled. Alex. I shook my head. I'll be back for my kids, I said coldly. But as far as we're concerned, you're dead to me. Without waiting for her to respond, I walked out of the backyard, my fist still aching from the blows I'd landed. The cool night air hit me as I stepped into the street. Behind me, Jess's sobs echoed into the darkness. But I didn't look back. Not anymore. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. My knuckles were raw, bruised from beating Bruce into the patio, but the pain barely registered. My mind replayed every second of what I'd just witnessed, Jess, laughing with Bruce. Her touch on his chest. Her voice. The lies. Every time I blinked, I saw her on that video again. Winking. Smiling. I wanted to scream. Finally, I pulled into an empty gas station. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, harsh and sterile, cutting through the dark. I parked the car and sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady myself. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Jess. Her name flashed across the screen, over and over. Call after call. Message after message. I didn't answer. Instead, I let my head fall back against the seat, closing my eyes. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was years of lies unraveling all at once. Eventually, I drove home. The porch light was still on when I pulled into the driveway. I stepped out of the car, the cool night air biting against my skin. The house loomed in front of me, quiet, dark, hollow. I unlocked the front door and walked inside, flipping on the lights. The place felt different now. Everything looked the same, but it was like the soul of the house had been ripped out. Jess's shoes were still by the door. Her jacket hung on the hook. Her mug sat on the kitchen counter, half empty, abandoned. I grabbed a rag and wiped my hands, scrubbing off the last bits of Bruce's blood. Then I dropped the rag into the sink and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone as it buzzed again. Another text. This time, I opened it. Jess. Alex. Please. Let's talk. You're scaring me. I love you. Let me fix this. Fix this. I tossed the phone onto the table. She was delusional. The damage was done. There was no fixing anything. The next morning, I woke to more messages from Jess. Jess. We have to talk about the kids. Please don't shut me out. The kids. It felt like a punch to the gut. They didn't deserve any of this. They were innocent. My whole world. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. Then there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, my heart stopped. Jess stood on the porch. But she wasn't alone. Bruce was right behind her. Bruised, bandaged, but still grinning like the devil. "Hey, Alex," he said, his voice rough. "Can we come in?" I clenched my fists, the anger bubbling up again. "You've got some nerve showing up here." Jess looked desperate. "Alex, please. This is about the kids." "The kids?" I said, my voice sharp. "You're really going to drag them into this?" Bruce stepped forward, hands raised like he was being reasonable. "Yeah. See, here's the thing," he paused, locking eyes with me. "They're not yours." I froze. "What the hell did you just say?" Jess flinched, her hand darting to her mouth, but Bruce stood his ground. He leaned casually against the doorframe, his busted lip twisting into a smug grin. I said, "They're not yours." The world tilted. My mind reeled as the words echoed over and over. I shook my head, refusing to believe it. "You're lying." Bruce shrugged, wiping his nose like the blood still dripping from it was just an inconvenience. "Am I?" Jess reached out toward me, her eyes pleading. "Alex, let me explain." I slapped her hand away. "Don't touch me." I stared at her, my vision narrowing. The woman I'd married. The woman I thought I knew. The mother of my kids. My kids. Were they? "No," I muttered, more to myself than to them. "No. You're lying." But Jess wouldn't meet my eyes. She was trembling, her whole body shaking as tears rolled down her cheeks. That was the only answer I needed. My chest felt like it was going to cave in. "How long?" I demanded, my voice low and deadly. Jess sobbed, shaking her head. "Alex, please." "How long, Jess?" I took a step closer, towering over her. "How long have you known they weren't mine?" Her lips quivered as she tried to speak. Since Emma was born." "Since Emma was born." I stumbled back, the air sucked out of my lungs. "Emma was 11. 11 years of lies. And you never told me." My voice was shaking now, on the edge of breaking. "You let me love them. Raise them. Believe they were mine." Jess dropped to her knees, covering her face with her hands. "I didn't want to lose you." "Lose me?" I laughed bitterly. "You lost me the second you let me believe a lie for over a decade." Bruce chuckled softly from behind her. That sound, that smug, condescending laugh, sent me over the edge. I lunged at him, slamming him against the porch railing. His head snapped back, and I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes for the first time. "Do you think this is funny?" I snarled, gripping him by the collar. "Do you think this is some kind of game?" Bruce coughed, blood dripping down his chin. "No game, Alex. Just reality." "Why?" I hissed. "Why the hell would you do this?" He smirked through the pain. "Because I could." That was it. No remorse. No regret. Just pure arrogance. I slammed him into the railing again, harder this time. The wood cracked under the force. Jess screamed behind me. "Alex, stop. You're going to kill him." Maybe that's the point, I growled. Bruce coughed again, trying to catch his breath. Go ahead. Hit me again. It won't change anything. They're still mine. They'll always be mine. The words sliced through me like a knife. I let go of him, shoving him back against the porch railing. He collapsed to the ground, wheezing and gasping for air. I turned to Jess, my hands trembling. I loved you, I said, my voice raw. I gave you everything. And this is what you do. This is how you repay me. Jess sobbed harder. I never meant to hurt you. I thought it would never come out. Well, it did. I took a step back, staring at both of them. And now? You're both dead to me. Bruce chuckled weakly from the ground. You can't walk away from them, Alex. They're still your kids. I glared at him. No. They were never mine. The words hung in the air. They were never mine. Bruce smirked through blood-streaked teeth, his back still pressed against the porch railing. You really think you can just walk away from them, Alex? You've been, Dad, for over a decade. That doesn't change overnight. Jess sobbed behind me, her shoulders shaking as she knelt on the porch. But I didn't care. Not about her. Not about Bruce. The only thing running through my mind was Emma, Thomas, and Lucas. I'd been there for their first steps. Their scraped knees. School projects, bedtime stories, birthdays, Christmas mornings. All of it. And now Bruce was telling me that none of it was real. That I was some placeholder. Some fool who never saw the truth. My hands clenched into fists again, but I forced myself to stay in control. I raised those kids, I said quietly, my voice cold and steady. I gave them everything I had. Bruce wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, grinning like he'd already won. And they'll always see you as Dad. But biologically? He spread his hands. They're mine. Jess finally found her voice, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. Alex, please. Don't punish them for my mistakes. Her voice cracked. They need you. They love you. I shook my head slowly. You don't get to say that. Not anymore. Her face crumpled. They're your kids in every way that matters. No, I took a step back, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me like a crushing wave. They were never mine. Jess stood up, reaching out for me again, but I stepped out of her reach. You don't get it, do you? I said, my voice rising. You've destroyed everything. Everything. She shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. No, we can fix this. We can. I cut her off, my voice hard and final. You can't fix dead. Her sobs grew louder, and for the first time, Bruce looked genuinely nervous. Look, man, he said, struggling to his feet. Maybe we should all just cool off. I turned on him, and he shut up fast. You've had your fun, Bruce. But if you ever show your face near my house again, near my kids, I'll finish what I started last night. Bruce raised his hands in mock surrender, backing away toward the gate. Whatever you say, man. I watched him go, my chest heaving, my knuckles still aching from the fight. Jess took a shaky step toward me, her eyes desperate. Alex, please. I didn't even look at her. Pack your things, I said quietly. By the time I get back, I want you gone. She froze. Alex. Gone. The word echoed through the night like a death sentence. I walked back inside, slamming the door behind me. Inside, the silence was deafening. I sat on the edge of the couch, head in my hands. The rage was gone, replaced by a hollow ache that gnawed at my chest. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Emma. Emma. Love you, Dad. See you tomorrow. I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart breaking all over again. They were innocent in all of this. They didn't know. But how could I face them now? How could I pretend to be their father when every time I looked at them, I'd see Bruce's shadow? I shut my phone off. For now, I just needed to breathe. By the time I got home, the house was empty. Jess was gone. The kids were still with her parents for the weekend. My kids. Except now, that word, my, felt like a question mark. I couldn't shake Bruce's smirk from my mind. His words gnawed at me. They're not yours. I paced the living room, staring at the pictures on the wall. Photos of birthdays, vacations, school events. All of it felt tainted now. I pulled down a family photo, me, Jess, Emma, Thomas, and Lucas, all grinning at the camera like we had it all figured out. Had I been a fool this entire time? There was only one way to find out. The next morning, I drove to Jess's parents' house. They lived about an hour away, in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. Jess had sent a text earlier. Jess. The kids are staying until Monday. You should come by and see them. I pulled into their driveway, heart pounding. I wasn't there for a friendly visit. I was there for answers. Her mom answered the door, smiling warmly. Alex. The kids will be so happy to see you. I forced a smile. Thanks. I've missed them. She let me in, and I heard Emma's voice from the living room. Dad? Emma ran up to me, her face lighting up with that same beautiful smile she'd had since she was a baby. Thomas and Lucas followed, all three of them wrapping me in hugs. For a moment, I forgot about the test. Forgot about Bruce. Forgot about everything. But then Emma said something that snapped me back to reality. Dad, why didn't you answer my message? I froze. The text from a few days ago. Sorry, sweetheart, I said, my voice shaky. I've been busy. Her face fell a little, but she nodded. Okay. I needed to act fast. Hey, I said, forcing a smile. Why don't you guys grab your jackets? Let's go for ice cream. They lit up instantly. Really? Really? At the ice cream shop, I took the chance to gather what I needed. Lucas left his juice box on the table, I pocketed it. Thomas wiped his mouth with a napkin and left it behind, mine. Emma brushed her hair out of her face, leaving a strand on her jacket, perfect. By the time I dropped them back off at Jess's parents' house, my pockets were full of DNA samples. The next stop was the lab. It was a small clinic, tucked away in an industrial park. I handed over the samples to the receptionist, who barely blinked as I explained what I needed. How soon can I get the results? I asked. She tapped at her keyboard. Normally a week. But if you pay for expedited processing, we can have them in 3 days. Do it, I said without hesitation. As I left the clinic, the weight of what I'd just done hit me. 3 days. 3 days until I'd know if Bruce was telling the truth. 3 days until my entire life changed, one way or the other. 3 days had never felt so long. I barely slept. Barely ate. My mind spiraled with every possible outcome. What if none of them were mine? How do you recover from something like that? What if all of them were? Then what? Was there a way to forgive Jess? By the morning of the third day, I was a shell of myself, tired, anxious, and holding on by a thread. At exactly 11:17 a.m., the email arrived. Subject, DNA test results, confidential. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. My hand hovered over the mouse, shaking slightly. This was it. I clicked the link, entered my password, and watched the page load painfully slowly. The results appeared in neat columns, each child's name followed by a percentage. Emma, 99.99% match. Thomas, 99.99% match. Lucas, 99.99% match. I blinked. I read the numbers again. They were mine. All three of them. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My shoulders sagged, the crushing weight of doubt and anger finally lifting. They were my kids. No matter what Jess had done, no matter how badly she betrayed me, they were mine. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the results. Finally, I picked up my phone and dialed Jess. She answered on the first ring. Alex? We need to talk. I met her at a small cafe outside of town. She looked exhausted, her makeup barely covering the bags under her eyes, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She sat across from me, hands trembling as she clutched her coffee cup. Thank you for meeting me, she said softly. I didn't respond. I just slid the printed DNA results across the table. She stared at the paper, her eyes scanning the numbers. Tears welled up as she read the confirmation, our children were mine. Alex, her voice cracked. I never doubted it. Never. Then why didn't you stop Bruce from saying it? I asked, my voice cold. Jess wiped her eyes. I panicked. I was scared you wouldn't believe me. Why would I? You've been lying to me for years. Her face crumpled. I know. I was wrong. I've been selfish. I've been horrible. But I never doubted that you were their father. And they need you, Alex. We need you. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Why? So you can keep lying to me? Keep sneaking around? No, she shook her head frantically. I've ended everything. I cut off everyone. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I studied her for a long time. Do you even know what you're asking? I said quietly. She nodded. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I love you, Alex. I never stopped. I laughed bitterly. Love? That's what you call this? She flinched but didn't argue. I'll never trust you again, I said flatly. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'll earn it back. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to fix what I've broken. For a moment, I said nothing. I thought about Emma, Thomas, and Lucas. They were mine. They were innocent in all of this. And no matter how much I hated Jess right now, I couldn't deny that we were tied together through them. Finally, I stood up, sliding the DNA results back into my pocket. I'm not doing this for you, I said, my voice cold. I'm doing it for them. Jess nodded quickly. Thank you. I held up a hand to stop her. This isn't forgiveness. It's a second chance to be a better mother. But as far as our marriage goes, I shook my head. It's over. Jess's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse right there in the cafe. But I didn't care. I had my kids. That's all that mattered. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door. Epilogue, 6 months later. Life didn't magically fix itself after that. It never does. I moved into a new apartment, decorated with pictures of my kids. Every weekend, I picked them up and took them on adventures, hikes, ice cream runs, trips to the zoo. Jess was there, too, but she kept her distance. She knew better than to push. And over time, things settled. The kids never found out what really happened. They didn't need to. I'd survived the worst betrayal of my life, and I came out the other side stronger. Because in the end, the truth mattered more than the lies. And the truth was simple, I was their dad. Always had been. Always would be.